Hey everyone, welcome to the 5 Beer Plan. I'm Brian, and this is the ongoing saga of an everyman's ale trail. In this episode, I get sour on yeast, ferment the homebrew, say goodbye to Steve Corbin from Feed Store Beer Company, and review a Flanders red variant from Brewery Verhaeghe. But before we get this party started, here is this episode's burning question. What is your favorite Flanders red? Mine comes from Dirty Couch Brewing in Seattle, Washington. Rampant Sour Red is a 6.8% ABV Flanders red. It poured a gorgeous deep red color and was massively sour. It had a little bit of vinegar acidity on the nose as well. It had a big tart pucker on the tongue that finished with a bit of a burn on the way down. In this segment of Yeast Feast, it's time to pucker up as I get sour on beer. The first real beer recipe that I adapted and created was a passion fruit sour. I talked about that in Homebrew Hijinks during Season 2. The recipe that I had modified called for lactic acid to be added during the fermentation in order to get that sour profile that was being targeted. While getting supplies at Listerman Brewing's homebrew store on a return trip from Florida, I asked Alan where I could find the lactic acid. He took me to it, but as I was picking it up to put it in my basket, he asked me what I was trying to brew. I explained my idea for the passion fruit sour, and his eyes kind of lit up. He told me to put the lactic acid back and to follow him. We went to the yeast section, and he pulled out a dry yeast from Lallemand called Philly Sour and handed it to me, indicating this will take care of the fermentation and lactic acid all at once. Hey, it was only my second beer, and I was open to anything that might simplify the process. Philly Sour is part of Lallemand's Wild Brew series. It is a unique species of Lachantia yeast. The description given says this yeast produces moderate amounts of lactic acid in addition to ethanol in one simple fermentation step. This first yeast in the Wild Brew series is a great choice for innovative, sessionable sour beers with refreshing acidity and notes of stone fruit. Philly Sour has a high attenuation in the range of 74 to 82%, as well as high flocculation. The ideal temperature range for fermentation is 68 to 86 degrees Fahrenheit, which makes it pretty versatile. The yeast will impart aromas that are described as sour, red apple, stone fruit, and peach. It also promotes good head retention, which is important in some styles of beer. It is ideal for traditional styles such as Berliner Weiss, Gose, American Lambic style, and American wild ales. Because of its resistance to hops, it works great with sour IPAs as well, and is alcohol tolerant up to 9% ABV. Going back to my passion fruit sour, I can attest to the fact that Philly Sour works very well. It provided exactly the nice sour element that the beer needed. I even had a family member exclaim that it was the best sour they had ever tasted. And if you're wondering, no, I didn't pay them to say that. I brewed another slight variant of the sour the following year, and it was fantastic. So if you're looking for a great multi-purpose yeast that will give you a great sourness, Philly Sour is the way to go. In this segment of Homebrew Hijinks, it's time to pitch the yeast in the small-time chocolate porter. During the last few minutes of the boil, I prepared my water bath in my sanitized kitchen sink. I'm grateful to have a deep well stainless steel sink with which to cool my wort, because it is easy to clean and holds enough water to cool my pasta pot. I put the stopper in the drain, added water, and then a 7-pound bag of ice. This would ensure that I could cool the wort as quickly as possible. Once the boil was complete, I slowly removed my hop basket and drained the liquid. I sanitized my lid, covered the pot, and placed it in the water bath. I swirled the pot periodically to try and accelerate the cooling. After a few minutes, I drained some of the water from the sink and added another bag of ice. I used to be quite concerned with keeping the pot covered while the wort was cooling, but realized that as long as I was careful not to introduce any contaminants, I would be just fine. I used my instant read thermometer to monitor the temperature to be sure I reached the appropriate temperature for the yeast. This time around, I would be using Fermentist Safe Ale American Ale Yeast US-05 for my beer. This is a pretty standard, neutral yeast for brewing a lot of different beer styles. It is best used between 59 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Once the wort reached this range, I carefully poured it into my sanitized fermenter and gave it a few stirs to add some oxygen. I had already sanitized the kitchen shears, yeast packet, and wrapped pill in preparation. I carefully placed the pill in the fermenter, cut open the yeast, and sprinkled it on top of the wort. I sealed it up and placed the airlock on the lid. So next episode, fermentation commences. Homebrewing can be overwhelming, especially if you are just starting out. Every month, I set aside a few minutes to talk to my go-to expert, David Young, owner of Buckeye Brewcraft in Columbus, Ohio, and ask him some common questions that homebrewers have. So David, when I first started out brewing, I had gotten a kit like most homebrewers do. I found out soon that there are a lot of different choices. And one of these choices is the all-grain brewing versus the extract partial mash brewing. What thoughts do you have on the topic?
So I think everybody should do everything. It's a tricky question to answer because you can hop on Reddit and everybody that can create an account is going to give you a different opinion. And they're all pretty valid, to be perfectly honest. Do we love saying that, or do we love knowing that, or do I love admitting that? No. But the reality is that as a home brewer, if this is something that you have interest in, you need to do the thing that interests you. So
Sure.
when I started home brewing with the limited availability that I had for bits and pieces and so on, I jumped straight into all grain because, quite frankly, as weird as it sounds, extract wasn't available to me, but grain
Sure.
was. So I started in that fashion. And I think, I was lucky that my first beer worked and we figured it out and it was great. And my wife loved it. And, life is great. However, if I were to rewind the clock and have all the things that are technically available to me now, I would probably very heavily recommend starting with something probably like you did, Brian, with a partial mash extract kit. So you still have some stake in the game with needing to get the flavors and perhaps the color out of soaking your specialty grains and doing a little, we'll call it a mini mash, and then adding the extract into your boil. That'll kind of guarantee that you're going to make something that you can drink and that will be more than likely good and be excited for the next one on.
Right.
But I'm reminded because as a guitar player for ever and ever and ever and ever and ever, so many children, when they express an interest in wanting to learn guitar, are given a big acoustic guitar by their parents. And big acoustic guitars are great. They're a great learning tool, but they're harder to play. Strings are a little tougher on the fingers. They're wider apart. They're larger to hold. And they're, quite frankly, and I hate to say this, they're just not cool. And so as a kid or in giving any kind of guitar lessons and talking with parents or folks that are buying a guitar for somebody getting started, get what they want to have. Because if they want to have it, they'll want to do it. And I think the same theory applies with home brewing. If you're excited about the tools and the equipment and the ingredients you have, you're going to be jazzed to do it. And that's going to keep you pumped for the next time and so on. Not everybody's path has to be the same. I'm a very technically minded person. And so that means that I'm very interested in the chemistry aspect and the biology aspect of what's happening with beer. But that's not everybody. If you want to make a beer that is guaranteed to work and keep you excited, extract, partial mash extract. If you want to be a glutton for punishment on day one, which is completely fine, just as much of a question there as what size brew to start out with. Brian, I think you're comfortable in the 1 gallon
That's
brewing
correct.
size for
Yep.
your consumption and your brew days and whatnot. Standard bear of measure in homebrew is 5 gallons. So, getting started, you got to know that once you make it, you're committing to 5 gallons of drinking beer or giving out beer to your friends. And is it beer that you want to give out to your friends is a great question.
That's the question right there. Do I want to share a crappy beer with the friends or an okay beer with friends, or do I want to drink a real beer?
Yeah. The other thing to keep in mind, too, just to mention it, is that just because homebrew kits and because recipes you'll find a lot of times work in 1 gallon, 5 gallon, or 10 gallon, doesn't mean that's where they have to live. Any great homebrew shop or anywhere that you go should be able to break a recipe down for you, whether you're presenting them with a 5 gallon recipe and you want to do 2.5 or 2 or 3 or 4. We do it all for folks all the time. Calculators are easy to use, and we're happy to use them.
That's one of the things I really enjoy about your shop and the services you offer with your monthly kits is that you have one that's extract and you have one that's also all grain. So you give people the benefit of choosing whichever option they want to go to.
Yeah, and we'll always give you both. So when you get the recipe for the kit, it has both the extract or partial mash version and the all grain. So you'll know, hey, if I ever want to do this again and I want to go to all grain, this is what that looks like.
And I remember when I started reading through forums and things, it was always said, extract is okay to start with, but like you need to go all grain.
I hate that mentality of you have to move into all grain. I brew extract beer at the store all the time. It's just so easy to have a 2 hour brew day where you may not even have to do a mash at all. I can make 2.5 gallons all the way up to 5 gallons of beer in a regular kitchen pot on an induction burner and make a really good beer. Now, does that mean that I'm making a really good beer that I'm going to submit for national judging and expect to be top tier? Probably not. And the only reason probably not isn't because extract is bad. It's just because I don't really know what's in the extract. I didn't have my hands on the grain to do it. So I don't know that this is two-row Munich, and I don't know what combination there are in there. But yeah, I make stouts all the time with extract. It's just too easy not to, and they're great. I make pilsners all the time with extract because it's just grain. It's just pilsner. So why not use pilsner DME or LME, skip the mash altogether, and have a 1 hour brew day with an ounce of crystal and have a good 5 gallon pilsner?
If you have a question that you'd like answered, reach out to me at 5beerplan@frontier.com and put Ask the Expert in the subject line. Also, if you are ever in need of homebrew supplies with great customer service, expert answers, and high-quality supplies, please check out Buckeye Brewcraft. You can find them on the web at buckeyebrewcraft.com and tell them that you heard about them on the podcast. Now, it's time for Barstool Banter. This episode, I go back to Bloomfield, Indiana, and wrap up my conversation with Steve Corbin at Feed Store Beer Company. Our topics go from theology to books to apples, and then go back to beer. If you find yourself in southern Indiana, please drop in and check them out. I don't think you'll be disappointed. Do you have any distribution there in southern Indiana?
Very limited. We distribute to a couple of local bars and restaurants in the county and a couple of bars in Bloomington, just small craft beer bars, one on the south side and one on the west side. Hoppy Wobble's on the west side and the Sinkhole on the south side of Bloomington. They've had us on for a few years now and like to keep our beers on. And then the Legion here in town, the American Legion, and the Vault in Linton, it's a couple towns over to the west.
All right. Do you, I assume just like every other craft brewery, you have takeaway you can get, either cans or growlers or something?
Yeah, we do growlers.
Okay. Well, when I was looking through your website, one of the things that I was really intrigued by was your pub theology sessions that you have twice a month. Can you tell me what that's about and how that came about?
Yeah, that started a couple of years ago. One of our customers and business owner here in town came in and was talking to us about he had seen something like that somewhere else. I don't remember where. And he was intrigued by that idea and asked if he could host a pub theology session here at the feed store. And so, we told him, yeah, you're welcome to. And so he put in all the legwork, and being in a rural, small community, it's not a wide variety of theologies being represented, but they discuss a wide variety of topics. And they've had, being close to IU in Bloomington, we have had some folks from outside of Protestant Christianity come in for it, and it's good to get those views to the community here. And there's a wide variety of views within the community. There's probably 24 churches here in town, and they've all got their own take on things. And then on top of it, you've got this guy, his daughter, and some of her friends come. So people in their mid to late 20s up into their late 50s to 60s that come in. So that also provides a good variety of views. And they've discussed, heaven and hell, and they've discussed raising children and premarital sex and drugs and alcohol. And I mean, anything that you might hear about in church, one way or the other, they've probably talked about it.
Okay. And does Ed leads that then twice a month?
It's usually Jason or his daughter Sam that's leading it. But if they can't be here, some of the other regulars. It's a pretty small group now, but they'll usually have 3 or 4 here out of. There's probably 8 or 10 that come semi regularly, but everybody's got stuff going on, so usually they'll have at least 3 or 4 here.
That's really interesting. Yeah. I think one of the things, especially in the craft industry, that maybe is not as widely looked into is the whole diversity. Craft brewing, craft beer, historically, I mean, it's really been very vanilla, if I'm being honest about it. I follow the industry as close as I possibly can. And, seeing a lot of shift in diversity in the industry itself. So when I saw that you had that, and like you said, you're talking about different viewpoints, I think that really goes hand in hand with like kind of the whole idea of having a brewery. I mean, back at the turn of the century, people went to the bars, and that's kind of where they had their gathering spot and talked about things like that. So that's really cool that you're trying to bring that back into popular culture. I mean, really, congrats on that. That's really awesome.
Thanks.
So, what other kind of events or activities do you have there at the brewery?
We do trivia on Wednesday nights. We have a run club that meets on Thursday nights. And even this week on Thursday, we had, I think, 4 or 5 people that came in and they went out for their run or walk. And it was cold and snowy, but they made it. We do bingo sometimes on the
Oh,
weekends.
fun.
Once a month, we have silent book club. So people bring a book with and have a beer and sit and read. And then after they're done reading, they talk about what they've read, what book they're reading. So it's not a prescribed book that they're reading. It's whatever you've got going on. And some people like to come in just because it's a nice, quiet place to sit and get away from whatever they've got going on in life and sit down and have a beer and read a book. This afternoon, we're actually having a writer's workshop. One of our regulars, a good friend of mine, is a published writer, and she's holding a workshop for anybody that wants to, learn about writing a novel or just coming up with ideas to put something on paper.
Sure. Wow. That's really cool. I like that idea too. You're bringing people in that would normally probably come into a brewery. That
We've
was
got a
great.
book trailer that comes with it. We do book fairs, we do plant
Really?
swaps, we do some like cookies and canvas, beer and canvas kind of painting things.
Okay.
Try to bring something in unique for people to do.
I remember the bookmobile would come to elementary school, and that was like one of my favorite days of the year. I was like, oh, I can't wait to get a new book.
Yep.
I didn't realize those things actually still existed and, for adults.
Yeah.
That's really cool. You said you're 4.5 years, so the summer is going to be your 5-year anniversary then.
October will be 5 years. Yep.
All right. You have any kind of event plan for that, or things bounce around your head?
Notionally, yeah, we're going to have a birthday party. We've had a party the last several years on our anniversary. This year we didn't because it was our fourth. We decided, we're kind of like with your kids. We're at the point where maybe we don't need a big party every year, but we'll celebrate special occasions or whatever. So yeah, we've got our fifth anniversary coming up in October, and that's 2 weeks after our town festival, which is one of our busiest weeks of the year. And so October is usually a busy month.
What festival is going on there in Bloomfield?
It's called the Apple Festival, and there's really not any apples to speak of around here anymore. But there were orchards, back in the early days of the community. There were orchards all over, and a lot of those have either closed or been, cut down for one reason or another. It's still a big part of the community. It's in the park right across the street from us. And so it ends up being a really big weekend, and we get to see a lot of people that come back home for the weekend and that we don't get to see very often. It kind of becomes a class reunion.
Do they close down the road where your brewery is then during the festival?
No, we're on a state highway, so that's open still, but the road around the park is closed, and they've got booths selling all the good junk you see at any town festival and
Right, right.
all that. And they do have people directing traffic on the road in between us because there's a lot of people walking back and forth, and being a state highway, you never know how people are going to be driving through.
So you don't necessarily have a booth at the festival. You just assume people are going to come across and hang out at the
Yeah.
brewery. Okay. Draws a lot of people?
Yeah, it does. I couldn't begin to tell you how many, but it is quite a few. We started doing a beer garden in our parking lot before we ever even opened because we had it, and we just decided that was something we wanted to do that first year. And actually, I guess there were some people that didn't like that idea, and and they asked the town marshal what we were going to do about it. And he said, "What do you want me to do about it? It's their property."
That's a great answer.
Yeah.
Will you have any beer releases during that time to celebrate?
Yeah, we usually try to do a beer release around that time. Every year we brew an Oktoberfest. That was actually the first beer that we brewed when we got our license approved. And so we released that for the town festival, and then our anniversary is later that month. And so that's when we released the Oktoberfest. And plus, we did a graph a couple of years ago. It was a stout and cider hybrid. It was 50% our oatmeal stout and then 50% just apple juice fermented out. So that turned out very interesting.
I was going to say that sounds interesting.
Yeah.
So like a chocolate and apple. That's an interesting combination.
Yeah, it had a little bit of a like that kind of burnt flavor you get in a stout. So it was almost like the intent was like an apple crisp with slightly overdone crust.
Okay, I can see that. Sounds good. I'll bet it went over well.
Yeah, it did. It went over really well. And then we aged some of it in barrels. And so that came out with almost like a cocktail flavor to it. The whiskey imparted on it.
Ooh, nice. So you do some barrel aging as well. That's cool. How often do you do that?
It varies. We've actually got a barrel aged barley wine that we're getting ready to bottle and release this spring. Our 100th beer, we decided to make a barley wine. And then we aged that in single malt whiskey barrels from Hotel Tango in Indianapolis. And we had that in those barrels for about 9 or 10 months, and then kegged it off, and we're going to bottle it. We've got the bottles and the labels. I just haven't had time to do it. The barley wine's called Big Ben because it was just kind of a play on the Ben Franklin being on the $100 bill, and that was our 100th brew. So we released that beer about a year ago, and then we're going to release the barrel aged version of it this spring.
Have you tried it yet?
Yeah, it's fantastic.
That's one of the benefits of being a brewer is you get to try a little bit, see how it's aging. That's awesome. What is your favorite part of brewing?
I like the creativity that comes along with it, but also trying to be more consistent with my brewing. Early on, I didn't know the system very well, and so it was difficult to be consistent with it. But now, here we are. I've brewed 130 batches of beer on it, and things are dialed in a lot more. And it's fun to do something new, and it's really fun whenever that new thing turns out how you'd hoped it would.
Yeah, right. From that creativity standpoint, it's always exciting when it really does. So, what is your favorite style of beer?
That's kind of a tough one. It changes often, and usually when somebody asks me, what my favorite beer is that we make or what my favorite style is, I said, that's like asking which one of my kids is my favorite. There might be an answer depending on the day. But right now I've been drinking our IPA quite a bit. This fall it was more our light lager, and I go back and forth between those a lot. I'm usually leaning more towards the light lager just because it's something that I can drink a few of and not, have to worry about getting anything else done.
Yeah. I agree with you there. One of the things that I like to do is to pop open a nice barrel aged or a Russian Imperial or a barley wine when I'm brewing and just let that set basically for the 3-4 hours that I'm brewing. That's like what I love to do.
Yeah. A lot of times we'll pre-fill crowlers, for the weekend when we think it's going to be busy. But then at the end of the day on Saturday, anything we've got left, that's usually what I take home to drink until the next week. This fall, we had a crowler of our barley wine, and I think I had Monday off of work. And so I took that home Saturday night, and Sunday, I had the day to myself for some reason. I don't remember what it was, but I cracked that thing open in the middle of the afternoon and would pour a glass and sip on it. And I never put it back in the refrigerator, just let it warm up, and sipped on that basically till 8 or 9 o'clock that night. And that was a pretty good day.
And it's fun also to see how the flavor profile changes over the course of the time as it's warming up from being refrigerated to being room temperature.
Oh, yeah.
And warmer. Yeah. I love that about those big beers. Do you have a least favorite style?
Yes, Hefeweizen. I
Okay.
just don't like the flavor profile, but I hate banana runts. That isoamyl acetate candy banana flavor. That is my least favorite candy flavor. I can enjoy Hefeweizen, but it's not one I particularly like to drink.
Do you brew them?
We do, yeah.
Okay.
Because in the words of Joe Dirt, it's not about you, it's the consumer.
I've not heard that quote, but that's one I'm going to put on my wall.
Yeah, we can't just carry snakes and sparklers. We got to carry that whole wide variety.
I think that's another thing when you own your own place and you are the head brewer, that you have to really think beyond yourself. Because clearly, I have certain styles that I like, but I know if I was going to open a business, I'd be like, I know a lot of people around here like the NASCAR beer. So you've got to have something light, you've got to have something that's
Yeah.
really sessionable. And so I get what you're saying there. Since you don't like that particular profile, your Hefeweizen, is it a little more subtle than that whole banana thing?
Actually, the yeast I use on that, yeah, it's a little less on the banana and a little more on the clove.
Okay.
Yeah.
Since I'm digging into yeast this year, what is your go-to brand of yeast that you use?
We use mostly fermented dry yeast. One, the 500-gram packs that they come in are perfect for a 7-barrel batch. And two, they're considerably cheaper than buying a liquid pitch.
Do you ever collect your yeast and repurpose it?
I have a handful of times, but with the amount that we're brewing, it's difficult to do that and be able to reuse. And so I don't usually, unless it's a pitch that I did. Sometimes I'll buy a liquid pitch from Wild Pitch Yeast, which is based out of Bloomington, and I'll try to reuse theirs at least once or twice to get a little more money's worth out of it.
That's one of the things I want to try at some point, is to catch my yeast and then try to use it for another beer, but we'll see if that ever happens. Up in this area, there are a lot of local hop farms and, of course, farming community in general. Do you have similar places there in the Bloomfield area that with hop farms and such?
There's nothing really local. There's a handful of real small hop farms that have started up locally that don't process their hops in a way that makes them readily usable for me. I was using Crazy Horse hops out of Knightstown, Indiana for a while, but they closed down. And there were a couple other like Indianapolis kind of area hop farms that have closed down since the pandemic. So right now, a lot of my hops come from Hophead Farms in Michigan. We use some fresh hops from them for our fresh hop beer. It's called Wit Hop IPA, and Vista hops were the fresh hops that we used, and then we used a wit beer yeast, and it came out tasting like fruit cocktail. It
See,
was
I don't think I've
really,
ever heard of
really good.
Vista before. What is the profile then? Is it just like tropical fruit, basically?
Yeah, it seems like any hop that comes out anymore, it's like tropical citrus, but it,
Yeah,
it turned out really nice.
that sounds fantastic. Do you still have it available?
We do, yeah. Yeah, we're about, I think, halfway through that batch, so we'll have it for a couple more months.
Okay. I asked everybody one last fun question. If you were a beer, what style would you be and why?
I was thinking about that a little bit earlier, and it's kind of tough to say. I would say probably, honestly, like something in the amber to brown range, like something that's like I'm a pretty easygoing guy. I can get along with about anybody. I don't get too worked up, so I'm not going to be one of those. Definitely not a trendsetter, so not a hazy IPA. I'm a go with the flow kind of guy, and I think an amber ale kind of fits the bill there. That's one that about anybody can manage. It's not going to be too hoppy or too strong. Just a nice malty backbone and get you through.
Okay. What is the name of your go-to amber there that you brew up?
Oh, we've done a handful of different ones over the years. The most recent one we've done, I really like, and it's an alt beer. So it's a little hoppier, but
Yeah.
the malt really balances that out. And it's called Macaroni's Mustache. It's named after my friend Heather that works for us that helps brew. It's named after her dog Macaroni. He passed away this summer. And so
Oh,
she wanted to make a beer to honor him. And since he was a dachshund, she decided, a good German alt beer would be perfect for him. And he was brown, so
sounds like a great beer also. Look forward to maybe trying to figure out a way to get down there and see what's happening. That's an area that I've really not investigated too much. Greenfield, Indiana is about the farthest south that I've gone, but not much further to the west and south of Indy. Well, Steve, I really thank you for taking time out of your schedule.
All right. Thank you, Brian. Have a good one.
Yeah, you as well.
Last call.
It's nearly time to wrap things up, but first, one more for the road. This episode, I'm drinking Duchesse Chocolate Cherry from Brewery Verhaeghe, located in Anzekem, Vlaams, Havist, Belgium. That's a mouthful. From the brewer, traditional Duchesse de Bourgogne with Belgian cherries and chocolate essence added during the maturation process in oak casks foeders. 20 kilograms of whole Belgian cherries are used in the production of each 100 liters of chocolate Duchesse cherry. Without further delay, so this is a 6.8% ABV Flanders or Flemish red ale. I poured the beer out into what can only be described as kind of a fluted goblet of sorts. The glass came from St. Benedict's Brew Works. Anyway, it just seemed appropriate for this regal-looking ale. So in the glass, it poured almost like the color of apple cider, I would guess. It had a nice, fine, effervescent head on it to begin with. And that's kind of dissipated, and now all those bubbles are collected on the edges, so it's almost made a ring of bubbles around the outside of the glass. So on the nose, get that great sour cherry aroma with maybe just a hint of that chocolate in there. So first up impression, oh yeah. So this beer just hits you front on in the teeth with a great tart flavor. My mouth just puckered right up. I love that kind of reaction for a beer. It certainly has that cherry forward flavor on the palate. It's a light-bodied mouthfeel. Woo! Sorry, folks. I'd taken another sip, and that sourness just hits you in the back of the tongue. So I just love that when a beer just excites a certain part of your tongue, like when it hits it. It's just very interesting how brewers can really lean into how your body's going to respond, not only with a sight or smell, but also with taste in that way. It's a lot of fun. Duchesse, you can get this pretty much anywhere. It's a pretty widely imported beer here in the U.S. This is just a fantastic beer. So the chocolate essence is here in this beer, but really the Belgian cherries take center stage on this Flemish red. It is such a great beer. I give this one 4.5 tasters out of 5 on the flightboard. Cheers, Brewery Verhaeghe. I'm always looking for new craft beverages to review. So if you've got one from your favorite local craft brewery, meadery, or cidery you'd like me to drink and describe, reach out and let me know. That's all for this episode of the 5 Beer Plan. With so many podcasts out there, thanks for choosing to listen to mine. Join me next time as I go to the dark side, sit down with Ron Extract from Garden Path Fermentation, continue with the homebrew project, and review another beer. Remember to hit the subscribe button on your preferred podcast platform to be notified of new episodes. Follow me on Instagram as well, 5 Beer Plan 2022, to see what is happening on my personal ale trail. I'd love to hear from you, and there are several ways you may do so. Leave a comment for this episode on Spotify, direct message me on Instagram, or email me directly, 5beerplan@frontier.com. Be sure to support your local breweries, choose your beers wisely, and drink them responsibly. Until next time, keep walking your ale trail, and stay thirsty, my friends.